Hi there. I'm still here. You are still here. And joining me today, the great PhD Dr. Christina Greer of Fordham University joins to talk about her essay in the New York Times as to why Black Americans are not surprised by anything that's happening. Also, I reached out to Mediaite's Colby Hall and caught up with him on how the media is covering the Trump cave and tariff, trade war, and so much more. The conversations with my guests start with Chrissy at 44 minutes into today's show, and my conversation with Colby Hall begins at about an hour 21 in. But first, I've got your headlines and your clips, your clip show. Also, it's Thursday, so tonight I will be hosting our weekly hangout, and I've invited members from my local Indivisible group to join us at our hangout as well. So it should be a fun time. A lot of new folks stopping by. I hope you will at 8 p.m. East sharp. Tonight, I might even invite some special guests to join us to talk about the chaos. So I hope to see you at 8 p.m. East. If you're a paid subscriber, you should get a link in your email from me around 7 p.m. with where to go. And if you're not a paid subscriber, well, what are you doing? Patreon.com/PeteDominic right now, because I can't do this show that you're listening to if no one pays me to do it, because this is my job. I'm an independent newsman. I'm a journo activist. I'm a satirist who is a news junkie who knows how to produce audio. And soon, video. Check me out over at Stand Up with Pete on YouTube and the TikTok and the Instagram and all of the things. Okay, well, lots to get to in the headlines, so let's start off with what's most important for you to know here on a Thursday. I pick all the most impactful issues, which are, of course, generally bad news and can be increasingly labeled under the phrase, "What in the holy hell just happened?" All right, let's get to it. I'm going to start by reading from The Atlantic, Charlie Warzel writing under the headline, "There was never a master plan. Trump backed down on tariffs. His supporters think that was the idea all along. To plainly state what is going on right now would make you sound delusional. The President of the United States has essentially been holding the global financial system hostage. He's done so by threatening massive tariffs on nearly 100 countries and territories, including one that is unpopulated. These tariffs were set to go into effect today, but have now been put on a 90-day pause for every country except for China, which will see a 125% tax on exports. Seems to have been calculated using a blanket formula that some economists and trade experts find almost nonsensical. Many have speculated the math was done by a chatbot. The administration's supporters do not have a coherent message about why any of this is happening. Before President Donald Trump announced the pause, they argued simultaneously that the tariffs were a temporary negotiating tactic, but also that they might be durable enough to bring manufacturing jobs back to the United States." That's how Charlie Warzel starts his piece in The Atlantic. In the New York Times this morning, early stocks in Asia and Europe rallied after President Trump paused punishing global levies, but U.S.-China trade tensions accelerated, and analysts cautioned that their full effects wouldn't be felt for weeks. Beijing's new 84% retaliatory tariffs on goods arriving from the U.S. took effect a minute past midnight on Thursday in China. The tariffs apply to goods that started leaving the U.S. today. Goods that left earlier have until midnight on May 13th to arrive before they will be assessed. The upshot is that the tariffs may hit semiconductors relatively quickly as they tend to be transported by air. But American commodity exports like grain and coal are usually moved by sea. That's the very latest, and that's how it works, which I thought was fascinating. And Thomas Friedman writing in the New York Times, not usually a fan, but he writes, "I have many reactions to President Trump's largely caving on his harebrained plan to tariff the world, but overall one reaction just keeps coming back to me. If you hire clowns, you should expect a circus. And my fellow Americans, we have hired a group of clowns." David Rothkopf, writing in his Substack Need to Know, says, "We face an existential crisis. While there are countless concerns that engaged citizens may have about a massive range of policy issues, for the moment our attention needs to be focused on just one thing. We either stop Donald Trump and MAGA and America survives, or we do not. In America, as we know, it dies." Of course, when I had this thought, I was reading of the reaction of the world to Trump's tariffs that had gone into effect just hours before. U.S. Treasury yields were up. The world was questioning whether it made sense to invest in the U.S. It did not seem unreasonable to think that, barring a sudden reversal, a deep recession was inevitable, perhaps worse. The sudden reversal ultimately came, as we know. Trump blinked. His big talk about remaking the world trading system and midwifing a new golden age for America driven by the return of good old-fashioned manufacturing jobs went out the window. Tariffs were put on hold. Tariff levels were reset. He maintained his trade war with China as means of continuing to seem tough, but in reality, he completely caved. And Political Playbook this morning, they write, America wakes up to a trade war this morning, just not the one we'd been promised. Trump's bond market-induced case of the yips may have won tariff reprieve for dozens of nations, but don't be fooled. The trade barriers he's pressing ahead with today still mark a 100-year high point for U.S. protectionism and will have huge repercussions for the American and global economies. Most significantly, the world's two most powerful nations now find themselves in an economic standoff of epic proportions, with experts predicting pain on both sides. So those are just a few of the takes with what happened yesterday when Trump blinked, he caved, and I've got more coming up in the clip show. But hey, at least the market rebounded, and everybody was really happy about how fast that happened. And some people probably made a whole bunch of money. And I'm guessing they were people that probably didn't need it that bad. Sigh. Okay, well, let's get to the rest of the headlines from yesterday. Let's first head to Israel, where there was an Israeli airstrike on Gaza City. I should have said we're in Gaza City now, where the Israelis killed apparently 23 people, including 8 children, which would be horrific if it comes out to be the true numbers. Also horrific in Ukraine, another very aggressive country, Russia sent a missile near a playground in central Ukraine that killed 19 people, including 9 children. So I do want to report when children are dying in wars, because I think that should be top news, horrific, and something all Americans should want to care about and do something about. Our orange man baby directed the Justice Department to investigate former Homeland Security official Miles Taylor over his anonymous essay and book hammering Trump during his first term. Trump went so far as to accuse Taylor of committing treason yesterday, which is, of course, a capital offense, for writing about what he saw during Trump's first term. He also ordered the Department of Justice to investigate Chris Krebs, whose reputation is pretty sterling. He was Trump's election security director. Trump hired him during his first term. And Trump then wildly suggested yesterday that Chris Krebs was part of an effort to steal the 2020 election. As Krebs repeatedly said, there was no evidence of fraud that he could find. And that really upset Trump. So now he is using the Department of Justice for exactly what he and his attorney general said he would not, which is revenge. As much revenge as he can get every single day. It is horrifying to see and to watch unfold. Also, speaking of horrifying, the Supreme Court yesterday ordered that now Trump is not required to reinstate 2 members of independent federal agencies that he wants to fire. The provisional decision affects a member of the National Labor Relations Board and a member of the Merit Systems Protection Board. Chief Justice John Roberts, who loves Trump apparently, issued an order that temporarily blocked lower court rulings that said the 2 officials should be reinstated. So we'll see what happens there, as well as what happens with the judgment that came from a federal judge in Texas, who issued an order yesterday on the Alien Enemies Act cases, temporarily blocking the Trump administration's use of the Alien Enemies Act to deport people held in a South Texas immigration detention center without due process. A second federal judge in New York said in a hearing that he planned a similar order applying to migrants held in the Southern District of New York. Well, wait till John Roberts gets his hands on those 2 judgments. We'll be watching that closely as well. And on Capitol Hill yesterday, House Republican leaders were barreling forward with plans to vote on a new budget blueprint last night to begin work on Trump's sweeping legislative agenda, even as a key bloc of hardline conservatives remain opposed to his plan. But then, last night, this went undercover because of Trump blinking and caving on his tariff threats. Last night, Speaker Mike Johnson pulled the plug on plans for a budget vote, and it became clear because he didn't have the votes. He did not have the votes in his own Republican fiscal conservatives, quote, fiscal conservatives. They're not, but they don't want more spending without more cuts. And he couldn't get the Senate Republicans' plan through the House because of those Republicans. So Politico says it's a blow to both his and Trump's authority, leaves serious questions about how a divided conference can find a way forward on Trump's agenda. Strikingly, they say, even Trump's meeting with holdouts this week failed to win enough of them to continue with the vote, to advance the vote. And Politico's also saying that Mike Johnson is now weighing two options, either taking the budget plan back to the Rules Committee today and tacking on guarantees of extra cuts, or heading straight to conference and asking House and Senate leaders and committee chairs to hash out the differences between their two different chambers' plans. So this is another problem now for Republicans, and we should make sure that we watch what happens with Trump's legislative agenda, which is what this vote is all about. Also, we learned yesterday that this tyrant Orwellian administration is now interfering in more high-profile, in this case, Ivy League colleges, and freezing their funding. Imagine that. The federal government is freezing funding going to colleges and universities because they don't like what they're teaching. That's right. More than $1 billion in funding for Cornell and $790 million for Northwestern amid civil rights investigations into both schools. Should dig a little deeper into those civil rights investigations, because I think there's probably a lot to learn that isn't about civil rights at all. The administration also said it's cutting Princeton's funding because of what they're teaching around climate, quote, exaggerated and implausible climate threats. So a lot more to talk about with that. I want to have a guest specifically who is covering this and trying to understand what these negotiations look like and what these cuts in funding means for these universities, their students, and the future of American research and progress and enlightenment. Also, Mike Huckabee yesterday, the former Arkansas governor and bizarro clown man who hosted a show on Fox News, who comes off as real congenial in person, but says terrible things on social media and would really love to bring the rapture. Well, he's been confirmed as ambassador to Israel, thus bringing the likelihood of the rapture that much sooner. He was confirmed by a vote of 53 to 46 yesterday, with senators largely divided along party lines. And finally, your final headline that I've got for you, University of Virginia, Larry Sabato, his crystal ball. He's a real smart guy and gets a lot right with his predictions. His crystal ball, it's called, is out with its first House ratings for 2026. Though Democrats are favored to win the House, the ratings are close, with 209 seats considered safe, likely, or leaning Democratic, and 207 safe, likely, or leaning Republican. Sabato identifies 19 House seats as toss-up seats. That's where we stand here, about a year and a half away from those elections. And the only other thing I'll say here at the end of the news segment is it does matter that people get outraged and make phone calls and go out in the streets, because we've seen many decisions and policy changes reversed as well as challenged in the courts. Your outrage does matter. I know it doesn't always feel that way, and you feel like one small person out there who maybe doesn't make a difference. I mean, I hear that a lot. I feel that way, and I have a pretty big platform. So I'm imagining lots of others who don't feel that way similarly. And I think you can tell that our outrage does matter. There's plenty of evidence. Just here as I'm talking, I see news breaking that after a real backlash, Social Security agency has scrapped plans to restrict phone service. You may have heard that news earlier in the week or last week, but it matters. Your outrage matters. Your actions matter. Your phone calls, your letters, your posts, all of it. It does add up. And when we see these things happening, we do have to stand up to injustice anywhere and everywhere, as much as we can. So that's my positive spin here. At the end of the news, now it's time to get to your clips. The Clip Show. This is where I pick what I think is the most interesting, impactful, viral audio and video clips from usually the last 24 hours and share them. And I think no one was more viral or impactful yesterday than this congressman named Steve Horsford. He is a Democrat. He's from Nevada, and he took Ambassador Jamieson Greer, who is Trump's trade representative, to task at this House hearing yesterday over Trump's surprise 90-day pause on higher tariffs over 75 countries. So this guy was testifying before the House Ways and Means Committee for over 2 hours when news broke that Trump announced he was lowering the global tariffs. So Congressman Horsford was the first member to question Greer after Trump's social media announcement, and he accused Trump of conducting policy without any kind of strategy and apparently without the input of Greer himself. This is real good, and so I'm going to play. I mean, he really does channel, I think, our anger. Good for you, Congressman Stephen Horsford. Take it away.
Mr. Trade Representative, are you aware that the tariffs have been paused?
I am, yes.
When were you made aware of that?
Well, I understood the decision was made a few minutes ago. It's
sitting here
under discussion.
Sitting here under discussion. So did you know that that this was under discussion, and why did you not include that as part of your opening remarks?
So typically what I don't do is divulge the contents of my discussions with
What are the
President
details of the pause?
Well, my understanding is that because so many countries have decided not to retaliate, we're going to have about 90 days.
No, excuse me? China increased their tariffs on the United States. Trump blinked.
What's the blink, sir?
What do you know about this pause? What are the details of it?
Well, the details, as I understand it, is that China continues to retaliate. Other countries didn't retaliate. The president 2 or 3 days ago said we wanted to negotiate with those countries that asked for meetings. That's what we're doing.
What are the details? How long is the pause? How many days? How many weeks?
I understand it's 90 days. I haven't spoken to the president since I've been
So
in
the
this
trade
hearing.
representative hasn't spoken to the president of the United States about a global reordering of trade.
Yes, I have.
And
I've just been in the hearing with you, sir.
But yet he announced it on a tweet. WTF? Who's in charge?
The president of the United States is in charge.
And what do you know about those details?
Well, as I mentioned,
it looks like your boss just pulled the rug out from under you and paused the tariffs, the taxes on the American people. There's no strategy. You just found out 3 seconds ago, sitting here, we saw you.
We've been discussing a
If
variety
you
of
came here knowing that you were going to be turned off, that these tariffs were going to be turned off, why didn't you include that in your opening statement? Why didn't you reference that as part of your testimony?
Well, I don't disclose my conversations with the president, sir.
These were specific questions we asked you all along. What's the strategy? These are real consequences for the American people and small businesses. I had a group of small businesses in my office earlier today talking about the impacts of these tariffs on aluminum and steel. This is amateur hour, and it needs to stop. What does this even mean for your negotiating strategy? How are you in charge of negotiation if the president is tweeting about this from wherever the hell he is?
The president was elected, and he runs the trade policy, and I advise him and execute his trade policy.
Who executes the trade policy?
I execute the trade policy.
Did you know that this was happening?
We have been discussing all kinds of...
And there's another member of the cabinet, Bessent, who just canceled coming to the Hill to avoid talking about the market because it's in turmoil. This in just days because there was no strategy, there was no plan. The president chose to take actions that he didn't even have the authority to take. He's put our economy in disarray and near collapse. We have small businesses and Americans who are concerned about their well-being, people's retirement, people's 529 accounts went down because of this administration. We have people that are planning to send their kids to college this fall. People who are retiring whose benefits have declined. Is this market manipulation?
No.
Why not? If it was a plan, if it was always the plan, how is this not market manipulation?
It's not market manipulation, sir.
Well, then what is it? Because it sure is not a strategy.
We're trying to reset the global trade system.
That's
offshored all of our factories.
And what has that done? How have you achieved any of that? But to enact enormous harm on the American people, which was our concern from the very beginning. Tariffs are a tool. It can be used in the appropriate way to protect U.S. jobs and small businesses. But that's not what this does. So if it's not market manipulation, what is it? Who's benefiting? What billionaire just got richer? And all the while, there are not even any Republicans left in this hearing. They all left because they don't even want to defend this. But meanwhile, the Speaker is rushing to the floor to pass a budget reconciliation to screw America by passing the biggest tax cut in history on the backs of the American people. WTF? Who's in charge? Because it sure doesn't look like it's the trade representative. You just got the rug pulled out from under you. I wish I could feel some empathy, but the empathy I have is for the American people whose very well-being and livelihoods are being affected. This is not a game. This is real life. I yield back.
Yeah, Congressman Stephen Horsford of Nevada doing it right, channeling the anger of the American people. I love that he yells WTF at that guy. I don't know. I thought that was great, and I hope you felt same way I did about it. All right, well, let's have a little fun now because I was invited on Australia's Today Show yesterday, where my best friend in the world, David Campbell, is the co-host along with Sylvia Jeffries, and they invited me on to talk shortly after Trump blinked and caved. And so here's how that segment sounded yesterday. I think the only context you need is I went down and visited Campbell last year. In case you didn't know, I went to Australia last year and stayed at his house. So that's what the reference to his broken sink is to. And the segment just before mine, there was apparently a poisonous snake that was on the loose somewhere in Sydney. That was the report just before this one. Here we go.
Hard to keep up, right? Well, for the very latest, we're joined by Pete Dominic from the United States Now. Pete, good morning to you. Good evening to you. Trump's team saying he's raised tariffs because, quote, when you punch at the United States of America, President Trump is going to punch back harder. Pretty brutal foreign policy, right?
Yeah, especially if the punch is landing on your own D. I mean, that's the policy. He's punching himself and all of us. You're both parents. You know, every parent knows the best way to get your kids to respect you is to make empty threats about consequences that you'll never impose. This guy is like an arsonist who then comes to put out the fire. It's like when I was visiting Campbell and I broke the drain and told him it was broken and then I fixed it. And he was like, thanks, mate. Yeah, I'm the hero.
Yeah, that's right. Well, so the global share market, we've seen it here as well in Australia. It has been in free fall since the start of the week. Now with these pauses, stocks are surging.
Yeah, I mean, it means really very little because the credibility of the U.S. government is completely shot. It's gone. It's annihilated. We don't trust our leaders ourselves. I mean, we lost 5 years worth of investments that people had for their retirement and for their kids' college saving in like a day. And no one thinks that's not going to happen again. This is not the art of the deal. He didn't even write that book. Someone else wrote it. It's like an insider trading bad comb over, guys. I mean, this is really, really ridiculous. Tank the market, scare people, let the rich people feast, then flip and say we're winning, rinse and rich and repeat. It's crazy what's happening.
What about the allegations of market manipulation? Because he put out something on Truth Social saying it's going to be a good time to buy.
I mean, it's exactly what he did. Whether or not that was the intention, I don't think he plans much. His own people don't know what he's doing while he's doing it. His own people representing him on these issues on trade and economics were on TV, guys, and testifying in front of Congress when they themselves found out that he put the tariffs off for another 90 days. He said he wasn't going to negotiate. They said he wasn't going to negotiate. Then he immediately negotiated. It's the art of the cave. He caved.
It's absolute chaos. And then meantime, what's going on with Musk and Trump? Because it feels like the bromance is starting to dwindle a little bit. They're not exactly in lockstep on tariffs here. What's happening? Is this the end of this relationship?
Likely it's going to be, or it's close. Elon Musk's popularity in America is about as high as that snake that's lost in Sydney. People are terrified of this guy. Nobody likes him. And everything that Trump touches dies. And I would say the same thing about Elon Musk, who had once the best-selling car, is now lost more of a percentage in profits than probably any car manufacturer that ever sold in America. So they're going to have to part ways. He's lost so much of his own net worth. I'm not sure that he cares. And yesterday, Elon Musk was playing a video game live, and the insults that people were sending him made him turn the game off like the child, like the toddler that he is. It's like two little toddlers fighting and calling each other names. This relationship is destined for ruin.
I mean, the protests earlier this week right across the US, Europe had them too. They rallied against Musk and Trump's policies. You were there. We spoke on the weekend. You went to one in your local area. I believe your daughters were at one in New York. What is the feeling amongst everyday Americans at the moment on both sides?
Well, we're obviously terrified, which is motivating people that would normally never go out to a protest. You should have seen these people. I mean, some of them I don't think had left their house in a few years since COVID. But people got out there because they're terrified of what's happening to the country with these illegal cuts to government, with just disappearing people who've done nothing wrong and sending them to torture camps. And obviously, with the crashing of the markets, the protests, people turned out. And I think we're not too old to not remember one of the most important Americans ever and what he said. Dr. King said, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about the things that matter. And in the end, we'll remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. And Americans aren't going to be silent. I mean, millions and millions of us, far more, do not support this president and his agenda than do. The election was the election, but most Americans, about 130 million of us voters, didn't even vote. And they all are pretty concerned about every part of our future. It's so uncertain, and people are really worried, and that'll turn us out of the streets. You're going to see a lot more of these protests every weekend and every week across the country. It isn't ending anytime soon.
Pete, have you checked your blood pressure lately?
I have a cuff on right now.
Good. I'm glad. Please keep monitoring. We love you.
Love you, buddy.
Thank you.
Let me into your country. Please let my family in. Please.
You got it.
I'm afraid there's some sort of taripan here.
Oh, there's a problem with Campbell's sink. He's got no more room in his house.
I did it.
See you, mate.
See you soon.
Thanks, guys.
Still to come on today.
All right, morning TV, huh? Isn't it fun? Did you like that? Was that fun for you? Hopefully it was enjoyable to hear me talking to my friends down in Australia on the Australian Today Show Extra, which is always a great time. I always love doing that. All right, now let's get to CBS News, who was interviewing the Health and Human Services Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and their correspondent there, chief medical correspondent, who is a physician himself, Dr. John LaPook. He sat down with Kennedy for his first network interview since joining Trump's crazy clown cabinet, and asked him about the cuts that he's making. And of course, RFK had apparently no idea about it. And it's, of course, devastating and upsetting to hear him talk about anything, much less this.
Since his appointment in February, Kennedy has facilitated sweeping cuts for programs and staffers alike. You proposed more than $11 billion in cuts to local and state programs addressing things like infectious disease, mental health, addiction, and childhood vaccination. Did you personally approve those cuts?
I'm not familiar with those cuts. We'd have to go.
There's like more than 50 pages of cuts that I actually went through.
The cuts were mainly DEI cuts, which the president
There were
ordered.
a lot, but I'll give you, for example, about $750,000 of a University of Michigan grant into adolescent diabetes was cut. Did you know that?
I didn't know that, and that's...
Oh, he didn't know that. Well, that was just one of 50 pages of millions and hundreds of millions of dollars in cuts, so I can't take any more. All right, let's go to CNN's Jake Tapper. He was talking to one of their chief business correspondents, Richard Quest, who's always fun to listen to and watch. And Tapper got to the question about the market rebound that I haven't really mentioned but once in today's episode of Stand Up. So here is Jake Tapper, the way that he is framing that. I love it. And more importantly, Richard Quest's response. Here we go.
Goldman Sachs says Trump's trade retreat has not changed their own recession forecast, even though the stock market went up today. Its best day in 16 years, still not back to where the stocks were when Trump announced so-called Liberation Day. Are the gains today, is it like pushing an old lady down the stairs and then wanting credit for helping her back up at the bottom there? How do you see it?
That's very
Thank you.
That's very
I made Richard laugh. All right.
I was going to sort of say it's like the arsonist calling the fire brigade and then taking credit. Similar sort of idea. No, this is why Goldman is saying what it's actually said. Number one, you still have the auto tariffs. Number two, you still have the steel and aluminium tariffs. Number three, you have the Chinese tariffs at 125%, the largest bilateral trade relationship. And number four, you have a new global US tariff of 10%, which is 3 times the previous average of 2.5%. So yes, the worst in terms of Japan, South Korea, the EU has been staved off. But there is so much tariff in the system at the moment that's just going to wash over the global trading system. We are so far from being out of this.
Yes, indeed we are. Well said. Let's not miss the forest for the trees. Is that the phrase? Let's go to CNBC's Steve Leisman, take his reaction from this. A lot of people are paying attention to this dude over on CNBC. He seems to be telling it like it is.
Let's bring in Steve Leisman, Steve, because we were talking a moment ago about how complicated things are for the Fed. If this is telling us that growth is going to hang in there in the meantime, I guess it makes things a little easier for them. But we're also seeing the odds of a cut at the next meeting go up to almost 90%?
At the next meeting, that's not what I have. At the June meeting, I have.
June, thank you.
For the May meeting, it went down to 20%. It went down a little bit for the June meeting. I mean, look, you can say this is a relief, but there's another 90 days of uncertainty to come, which is worth it. And you could also try to spin this as a victory, or you could see this as a failure of policy and leadership on the part of the White House, Kelly, in the following way. I remember the night before the tariffs were imposed and the day and that day, and I asked our great White House reporter, Megan Casella, why we had heard nothing of the plan. And the reason I asked is it because they don't know or they're not saying? And what we found out since is they didn't know. The plan was made up that day. It was not nobody on Wall Street. They didn't run it by Wall Street. They didn't run it by business leaders and CEOs. And now you could argue, after withering punishment from markets, from bond markets, trillions lost across the globe, the president, he didn't just flinch, but he ducked when it came to what was coming his way here. So they can try to spin this as a victory, and maybe they have 75 calls. Maybe they get 75 trade deals. But it just seems to me that the other way to tell this story is that the president just flinched and did not run this by the markets, run this by the business, and he was facing a deep recession. I will point out there are still trillions lost from that day, Kelly. There's still quite a bit that's been lost here in terms of where we were just on April 3rd. We're still down, way down. These 10% tariffs, the market doesn't like these either. We didn't get that back yet.
Yeah, we didn't get that back yet. All right, well, let's get to some of the responses from the late-night comedians, and everybody had something to say about Trump caving and blinking. Let's first head to The Daily Show, where the host last night was Desi Lydic. I think I'm saying her name right. Here it is, a couple minutes from her opening.
Last Wednesday, Donald Trump announced that in 1 week, he was going to impose the biggest increase in tariffs in 100 years. And after a week of panic buying a year's supply of toilet paper and air fryers, the day has finally arrived.
It is 11:59 and 48 seconds, which means we are just moments away from the president's new tariffs.
It's President Trump's long-awaited tariff day.
It's reciprocal tariff day.
Well, the tariffs are here.
All right, it is tariff day.
Happy Tariff Day, everyone! Woo! Oh. It's what Trump is replacing Juneteenth with. Now, Trump is celebrated by putting tariffs on every country in the world, including 104% on products made in China, which is probably fine. I mean, how many products are made in China? But Tariff Day wasn't just celebrated here in America. Other countries got in on the fun, too.
Swift retaliation. Both China and the European Union are responding to President Trump's tariffs. China has announced its own retaliatory tariffs, 84% on all U.S. goods it imports.
According to the European Union, almonds, orange juice, poultry, soybeans, steel and aluminum products, tobacco and yachts imported from the United States now will have a 25% levy on them.
25% on yachts? Why do these trade wars always have to screw over the little guy? I'll be honest, I didn't even even know America made yachts. I thought the only thing we made here was Nepo babies. But this really feels like it's spiraling out of control. It seems like the smart move is to back off this whole thing. But Trump's team has been adamant that they will stay the course.
This is not a negotiation.
It's not the kind of thing you can negotiate away.
I don't think there's any chance that President Trump's going to back off his tariffs.
The president made it clear yesterday this is not a negotiation.
Trump posted this morning, my policies will never change.
Well, that's it then. They're in it to win it. Full speed ahead. From the window to the walls. Skeet, 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 motherfuckers. Trump's policy will never, ever change.
This is CNN Breaking News.
The president announcing just minutes ago that he's now, quote, authorized a 90-day pause on some of his new tariffs.
What? The trade war's over? But it's tariff day. I shaved my legs for this. Now I have to grow it all back.
All right, The Daily Show last night, Desi Lydic, and now let's head over to NBC's Seth Meyers. Hosting Late Night, this is what he had, a little bit of what he had to say.
You are never going to believe this. You know those tariffs Donald Trump announced last week that sent stock markets crashing and caused a global financial tailspin and sparked intense backlash from his own supporters on Wall Street and in the Republican Party and shattered American alliances and used made-up numbers and put tariffs on penguins and caused his own advisors to engage in a public war of words in which one of them called the other a moron and forced Trump to issue a statement telling everyone to be cool and hang tough, except he accidentally wrote the words Hank Tough, which sounds like the name of a fake advisor he would invent to blame for his stupid tariff plan. Don't blame me, blame senior White House advisor Hank Tough and his buddy, the lemonade kingpin Mike Hard. Well, this might shock you, but today Trump paused both of those tariffs for 90 days. One day after his White House said he would not pause tariffs, and about 2 months after he announced, then paused, then announced, then paused, then announced tariffs on Canada and Mexico, then left them out of the tariff announcement, then said he wouldn't pause them, then paused them? Well, I mean, at least we're 2 years into the Trump presidency, right? What? It's only been 80 days. All right, don't freak out. Just be cool, everybody. Hang tough. Damn it, now I'm doing it. For more, a closer look. You might remember that when Trump made his big tariff announcement at the White House last week, he held up a chart that looked like he stole the menu from a drive-thru, ticked off a bunch of numbers no one could read or understand.
European Union, we're going to charge them 20%. Vietnam, they charge us 90%. We're going to charge them 46% tariff. Taiwan, 64%. We're going to charge them 32%. Japan, 46%. We're charging them 24%. India, 52%. Switzerland, 61% to 31%. Indonesia, Malaysia, Cambodia. Oh, look at Cambodia, 97%. We're going to bring it down to 49%. United Kingdom, 10%. And we'll go 10%. South Africa, 60%, 30%. Brazil, 10%, 10%, Bangladesh, 74%, Pakistan, 58%, Sri Lanka, 88%.
First of all, I love how he says Indonesia, Malaysia, Cambodia, like he's doing a vocal warm-up. That's how I used to get ready before I go out for a weekend update. Indonesia, Malaysia, Cambodia, Indonesia, Malaysia, Cambodia, weekend update, Peking cupcake. Also, why did saying South Africa make him so sad?
South Africa,
All right. There's Seth Meyers. Now let's head over to Jimmy Kimmel last night. Here's how he put it.
Thanks. Please sit, relax. Thank you for joining us here at our studio in Hollywood. I appreciate that. I am sad to report that due to the ongoing tariff situation, we will no longer be able to offer free tickets to the show. We'll be passing a MAGA hat around. If you could please give slightly more than you can. We've got to replenish those 401ks. My 401k is now a 301k. Oh, what's that? Oh, I'm getting a message. He paused the tariffs. He's paused the tickets are free again. So for a while, anyway. This is day 79 of Trumpomania. It has been it's been fun watching this lunatic gamble our life savings this week. It's like It's like handing a Social Security check to your dog and sending it to Caesar's Palace. If the dealer has 16, stay, okay? Stay. It was another roller coaster of a day. Trump this morning hit the snooze button on almost all those big, beautiful tariffs he levied. He paused the tariffs for 90 days, which puts us at right around the 4th of July to blow things up again. 90 days of turmoil now. But the world of finance was relieved, to say the least. The market shot way up today. The S&P had its biggest day since 2008. Wall Street was up 12%. Think about that. The best thing Trump has ever done for America was undo the incredibly dumb thing he did. I mean...
Very funny from Jimmy Kimmel. And now, finally, let's check in with Stephen Colbert at The Late Show.
Unpredictable. It's a very unpredictable time for our country, for the world, and I pride myself on keeping a cool head in stormy seas. So I want to tell you, in a very measured tone, a little news item I saw today. The Dow is back, baby! We're rich! We're rich as archdukes! Caviar and Krugerrands for all my friends. Tell Gatsby and Daisy to crack the good champagne and crank up the jazz, because we're going to spend. Because this afternoon, after days of historic market losses thanks to Trump's random-ass tariffs, the Dow skyrocketed nearly 3,000 points. And you know the old saying, whatever goes up must continue to go up forever. So why the surprise money party? Well, because just after 1 p.m. today, the mad emperor of global trade decreed, based on the fact that more than 75 countries have called representatives of the United States to negotiate a solution, I have authorized a 90-day pause and a substantially lowered reciprocal tariff, ... of 10%. Well, thank goodness. Thank goodness that at 1:18 p.m. today, Donald Trump made a decision that at the last minute saved our nation from a previous decision by Donald Trump. I mean, thank God. I mean, wow. Thank God he is there.
Yeah, that's very similar to what Kimmel said, and that's great because everybody is hopefully coming to the conclusion that I did and everybody else has, that the arsonist is trying to put out the fire. He created the problem that he's trying to solve and then take credit for it. This has always been part of the strategy. It's been effective in the past. It's worked. It's convinced people. It's confused people. And it's tragic. It's truly tragic. But at least we got some comedy there at the end, which I always like to end the news segment in. But we are now ready to get to my guests. How about it? How about it? I was explaining to someone yesterday, a young person in media that I'm mentoring who's looking for work, about how I produce this show every day. And she worked in radio for her internship. And she couldn't believe it, folks. She couldn't believe that I do all of this on my own. But I figured it out. How to aggregate, collect the news, how to do all of the audio and everything else that I'm doing each and every day. And I can't do it without your support. So thank you very much. It's a lot of work, this news segment alone, as are the interviews, scheduling them, doing them, and making them effective. But we do it. We push through, and I love doing it, and it gives me a lot of purpose. So I'm so thankful and grateful that so many of you appreciate it. And if you do, please sign up for a paid subscription. Sorry, I don't have ads, so I plugged the show a couple times. And specifically the Patreon, patreon.com/Pete Dominic. That is where most of my income lies, so please sign up now because it's where I spend most of my time trying to put this baby together for you each and every day. Today we get two great guests joining me. Colby Hall from Mediaite coming up. We caught up yesterday afternoon, but I had a great conversation with Christina Greer, Dr. Christina Greer of Fordham University. I mean, I always have a great conversation with my friend Chrissy. She's a political scientist who studies black ethnic politics and public opinion. She's written a couple of books now, and most recently, How to Build a Democracy, from Fannie Lou Hamer and Barbara Jordan to Stacey Abrams. And she's got this piece, this essay in the New York Times, which is titled Black Americans Are Not Surprised. I'll read from it a little bit during my conversation with Chrissy. I highly recommend that you go follow her and support her on all social media, her podcast. Everything is linked in the show notes. And we love Chrissy. She's a good friend of mine and brilliant academic, writer, and thinker. and I always love talking to her. So let's do it right now. My latest with one of our favorites, Dr. Christina Greer, who I think is going to have to be at Pod Jam 3 if there is one. And we join our conversation already in progress as Chrissy was talking to me about her most recent visit to the wonderful Brooklyn Botanical Garden. Let's do it.
It's just, it makes me, there's a Shakespeare garden with all these different herbs from the different plays. I could go on and on. It's really just one of these places that just makes me so incredibly happy. And I have my favorite trees that I hug. They have a whole like Native American section. It's really well thought out.
I want to go there with you someday. I think you should charge people to go with you because you know so much about it. You could point to so many things.
That might be illegal. It's their park. But I'm more than happy to take you around so we can just, I'll show you I have 4 favorite trees that I like to hug. And then there's this massive tree called a Caucasian wingnut that just makes me happy.
That is not the name of the tree.
It is absolutely the name of the tree. I'll send you a picture. And I took a picture of the placard. I was like, that clearly had to be a black botanist that was like fed up one day.
That is really leading me to a lot of different jokes. That is the Caucasian wingnut, aka the Stephen Miller. That is the Charlie Kirk of trees. Why? I wonder why they hurt that tree with that name. It doesn't seem like a nice name. Poor tree didn't do anything.
Maybe he's from the Caucasus region. I don't know.
Oh yeah, probably. There's a lot to talk with you about. First, I just want to talk quickly about New York City politics, which you cover as well as anybody. And I don't know that everybody listening cares so much about New York City politics, but they probably should. It's often a harbinger, and it's really fascinating and the history and all of it. But mainly we're talking about a mayoral race, and apparently Eric Adams, the New York City mayor, the embattled New York City mayor, has decided he's not going to be a Democrat anymore. Andrew Cuomo is running, which is crazy because he shouldn't be anywhere near any public office given his past. What do you want to tell us, a national audience, about what's going on in New York City politics, particularly the mayoral race?
Yeah, it's an incredibly important race. Our budget is larger than most countries. And the amount of money that comes through the city, but also the level of dignitary. So like the leadership of New York does matter. It's not surprising that Eric Adams is running as an independent. He was a Republican many years ago. Strategically, I think it's a brilliant move. If you can do it, you have the name recognition, and he doesn't have the matching funds and the money to really be competitive in this June 24th, very crowded. We now have, this will be our second election season where we have ranked choice voting. You can rank up to 5 people. They rolled that out in 2021 with very little education as to what it does strategically, how it works. Some advocates say it helps candidates of color and marginalized groups. Some argue that it hurts candidates of color and marginalized groups. It definitely, in a race like this where, would Andrew Cuomo, some people, voters aren't necessarily rational. So some people really like Zohran Mamdani, right? Who's super, super progressive. He's probably the most leftist of everyone in the race. But some people are like, oh, he won't win, so I'll vote Cuomo number 2. Wait, what? Right. They couldn't be more different. Some people don't really know how the ranked choice voting system works. So some will only rank one person. Some might rank all 5, up to 5 options. Some people are like, I only have 3, so I'm only going to rank 3. And obviously when people participate in different ways in the system, that changes things. Don't forget also on your ballot, there's several races that are not ranked choice. So we're also asking voters to educate themselves on quite a bit. And granted, it's their democracy, sure, but this rollout, I think, with no real education was done pretty poorly. But that does make Eric Adams competitive in November. We have Curtis Sliwa, who's running as the Republican, he's like the red beret subway guy. Sadly, he is on the ballot, and we should take him seriously. I think we should always take people seriously if they're on the ballot, because there is a very real world where, let's just say, a progressive candidate gets through, and New York's not necessarily a progressive city. It's not a hardcore blue city by any stretch of the imagination. You have sort of crazy red beret Republican guy, middle of the road, embattled for mayor Eric Adams, and then someone else on the Democratic Party ticket, which the general is not ranked choice voting. And that could just give us, we have no idea what the results will be.
It would seem that from my vantage point, which is none, really, I feel like the biggest issues would be like housing and immigration that would animate people. Obviously, the economy and public transportation, the price of things always matter. But what are New Yorkers most concerned about, or what are the candidates running on?
Yeah, affordable housing obviously is always a big thing. The migrant crisis / public safety is always big. The big shadow that's hanging over the primary race, I moderated an event a few weekends ago for the Working Families Party and The Nation magazine, which was like, how are you going to deal with Donald Trump? How are you going to deal with a president who on any given Tuesday will wake up and say, I'm actually not giving you the $500 million that was promised for whatever it is, whether it's education or the environment or transportation or whatever money, right? I'm going to starve either Albany or New York City directly. So the question I think on a lot of voters' minds is, do you use a carrot or do you use a stick? Are you going to do honey or are you going to do vinegar? So in Andrew Cuomo's 17-minute introductory campaign video, they have a storied past. Obviously, these two Queens boys have known each other for many decades. But when Andrew Cuomo was governor and Donald Trump was president the first time during COVID, I don't know if you remember, many New Yorkers from across the country, or many Americans from across the country, looked at Andrew Cuomo as the guide, the leader, before he had the nursing home scandal and obviously several, counting 11 Me Too's and instances of sexual misconduct. But before that, there are people from California and Colorado calling me like, oh my gosh, I wish your governor could be our governor. Because you remember he had his charts and he was like, hey, don't inject yourself with bleach. Make sure you wash your hands. You're trying to...
Yeah, I never thought everybody thought it was so wonderful, and I never thought it was impressive. I always feel like people doing their job is not that impressive, and New York was the tip of the spear with COVID. He was giving daily press conferences. Every governor would have done it. They all would have been flanked by experts with charts to look like they're in control. And I was just like, yeah, he's doing – it was like giving Trump credit for developing the vaccine. Like anybody would have done what he did. Oh, he took away the red tape. Everybody would have done that. He's just doing his job. I'm not giving you extra credit. But that, nonetheless, it tricked people, in my opinion, into thinking Andrew Cuomo was some wonderful leader when, in fact, he's a prick. Always has been.
Yeah, and a bully. There are a lot of people who, in that question of how are we going to get goods and resources for New York City with Donald Trump as the president, who clearly is on like a revenge vendetta tour, some people want a bully to match a bully. Right. And that is something that Andrew Cuomo's kind of threading. He's also doing what I would argue like a less is more tour, where he's not participating in any of the forums, of which there are forums almost every night. He's just essentially quiet, right? Let me just run on my name and kind of the memories. And some people have very positive memories of him. So you don't have to ask me hard questions about housing, right? Public housing. Because he's on the other side of the tin can. Usually people are coming to the governor, he was there for almost 3 full terms, asking for money. Here, it's as mayor, do you know how the budget really works from this side of the table? Do you understand Mitchell-Lama? Do you understand our public housing? Do you understand sort of our rent guidelines and the difference between rent control and the various subsidies that we have, the real estate corporations? He's been in Albany since he was 19 years old. I've always said that he's raised in captivity, but I'm not convinced that he knows much about New York City because he hasn't said anything. Until he actually starts talking about New York City, I'm going to go under the sort of assumption that he doesn't really know much about the various 5 boroughs. I don't think that there's anyone in this country that knows more about Albany, New York than Andrew Cuomo, period.
Yeah, his dad was there first.
But as far as New York City, it's a very different story.
I just one point on this, which is I've tried to make the case and want to believe that as a Democrat, we still have a threshold for what we will not allow, a standard which must be met to win a primary, to be in public office. And if you have allegations, serious allegations, or even one, and it's not that serious, that you've assaulted or harassed woman or women, that usually would prevent you from winning a primary in almost any Democratic race. That is not the case here. And to me, that's a sign of the times. Maybe it's just an exception for this guy in this city, but I don't like it.
If you can have a president of the United States who's had credible lawsuits.
The Democratic Party was supposed to be supposed to have a higher standard. I wanted to believe.
And there are some people who are like, we're in different times and there were different. I will say women of a particular age, definitely during Andrew Cuomo's various Me Too's, again, as I said, there were 11, they did range. And I think that there were some women, especially of a certain age, who were like, that's just the price of doing business in the workplace. Fine. Men kiss you on the mouth sometimes. Backs it.
What do you think about those two different schools of thought? Women of a certain age who've seen it all, and now they're seeing these women and they're saying, oh, really? Why are you making so much noise or making such an issue? What is your opinion of those two different schools of thought of women of different generations on the issue of harassment, much less assault in the workplace?
Yeah, I think what's really hard, and we have not had that conversation as a society, which this country doesn't like to have hard conversations about complex issues. We'll get to that in a second. But I feel like as a Generation X person, I'm like wedged in the middle, right? Where I have students, it's like a zero tolerance policy, right? And then you have older women who are like, if we put every man in jail who was inappropriate, like, no, we'd have just full jails and we wouldn't have a functioning society. I think the hard conversation is we never had a real sit down with Me Too. It was like, it's Me Too, but there are a lot of gray areas in Me Too. I do think that kissing someone on the cheek against their permission is very different than a full-on sexual assault / rape. I do think that those two things are different. Do I think hitting someone on the butt, maybe by accident, maybe on purpose, I don't know, is different than forcing your tongue down their throat? I do think that those are different, but we also have right now, like this conversation of like due process. That does, listen, I am not in the school. I'll just put it this way. I'm not in the school of believe all women. I grew up with the stories of Emmett Till and Black men who were lynched because white women decided that for whatever reason that day they said that they were raped. I went to high school where white girls would date Black dudes. And when their parents found out, it was like, oh my God, I was raped. It's really, we all knew you were dating. So I'm not knee jerk in women tell the truth all the time. That is just not where I've been. I do err on the side of like caution and let's take them seriously, but I'm definitely not in the school of, no matter what, I know for a fact this woman is the victim. That's not ever been my wheelhouse.
I appreciate all of that nuance, and I'm interested to hear more from women, especially on this issue.
And that is my opinion, right?
Sure.
Some women are definitely like, believe all women no matter what. And I'm like, not as a Black woman, at least for me, not as a Black woman. I'm not in that school of thought.
We could talk about this for the rest of the interview. I want to get to, I'm pausing because I really want to pivot to your article in the New York Times. You have a piece in the New York Times titled Black Americans Are Not Surprised. Already talked a little bit about it before I brought you in here on the show, but let me just real quick. I wasn't surprised when I saw that you had been written an essay in the New York Times because I think you're tops.
Thanks.
In the world of writing.
How about that?
And what?
It's my third.
I figured you'd done it before.
As much smack as I talk about the New York Times, and I talk a lot of smack about them. It was my third.
That's fine. I don't think that has that you have anything to do with each other. I think that you can criticize yourself, your school, your institution, anywhere, and also be a part of it and contribute to it. So my quick question was like, do they reach out and say? Because sometimes they reach out and say, we would love to have you write this, or was this something that you were shopping around, or that you wanted to write? Which way did it start?
It's funny. I pitched it to them.
You did.
And I was like, hey, essentially the 3-sentence pitch was, until white people understand Black history, we're not going to get out of this moment. And Black history is American history. And the fact that most people don't know it leaves them befuddled at this particular moment. So the editor says, hey, write it up and give it to me by Thursday. This is like a Wednesday. And sadly, this story is evergreen, what we call when we write op-eds, right? Just like an evergreen tree, I can publish it in March or April. I can publish it in September, right? There's certain stories that aren't evergreen. If it's the anniversary of 100-year anniversary of blah, 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 like that's not an evergreen story. We got to get it done. Whereas this is, sadly, it's okay. Discrimination against Black people. We can publish this story whenever. I went out the night before with some colleagues and had a lovely evening. That's the adult version of saying had a lovely evening. And when I got home, I was like, oh my gosh, my Thursday is completely packed. I'm not going to have time to write this op-ed that I promised the editor. And so I woke up at 6 a.m. and I've clearly been thinking about this. I was at UCLA last month. I had some really good conversations with some colleagues. I had done a panel at Brown the week before and had really good. So I was like, clearly it was inside of me that I needed to get it out. And so I just woke up at 6 a.m. and I wrote 1,200 words in 30 minutes and sent it off.
Wow. It is a wonderful and important piece. You're right. I think my late grandmother, Lillian McCrae, quite often these days, she might have completed only a portion of 9th grade, but living in the segregated South gave her and other Black people of her generation, she was born in 1921, an education in what Americans are capable of. She saw a lot, maybe too much. In one of our many long talks on her Yulee Florida porch. She said of this country, the only time you should be surprised is when you're surprised. I'm sure you had many wonderful conversations with Grandma Lillian. What did she mean by that then?
And we took this other sentence out, which is, and by surprise, she meant white people, like this country. Like, white people should not surprise you, nor should their behavior. By the way, that town, Yulee, that she's from, is named after Senator Yulee, who's the first Jewish senator in the history of the United States. Just as an aside, I just love miscellaneous American facts because we have things around us that we don't even know about. So,
to a certain extent, I'm happy. It makes sense to take that sentence out, not because it would offend, but because it is too specific. Because it would seem that black folks, I almost think it's a good edit because black folks are not surprised about all kinds of different things that aren't necessarily connected strictly to white people. Could be other people, could be other things, but it's the idea that you present here. I feel like that matters more.
This is why editors are great. Because it's like I write. I also forget that I can be direct, right? And I'm used to talking about race. I'm used to talking about race, and I think that this is a broad audience, and so they're just like subtle edits that the editor made that I think just made it a stronger piece. He asked me for some examples, and I was for something, and I was like, "Oh, Stacey Abrams, Higher Heights, right? Kamala Harris. These are the women who warned us about this." I had something in there about birding that they took out, but that's okay. Sometimes it does detract from the larger message. But some of it, a lot of it was just like minor copy editing. But yeah, what I wanted to say was just like, until white people especially understand Black history and this moment, that is very common to Black people and like very familiar, you are going to be shocked and dismayed. But it's like, you have to understand the capacity of your fellow Americans, like to essentially hunt people down in this country and destroy what is really good and what is really great about this country. And I think a lot of Americans white Americans in particular, don't think that's possible. But it is. Like, you've heard stories about not just chattel slavery, but Jim Crow and Native American expulsion and almost near extermination. You've heard stories about reckless global expansion and what we've done to people abroad. You've heard these stories. You have to know that the possibility and the capacity is real.
In the last 20 years, there have been several very popular, widely seen films, much less documentaries, books, and so on. It's like you're saying you have to heard. It's not like we only learned it, if we did anything in history.
Cell phones, you've seen it. And so this level of cruelty also that was promised, right? It's not like you didn't know it was promised. Kamala Harris kept saying in the debates and in interviews, and these interviewers were like, he's not really, basically, you're being a histrionic Black lady. And she's, are you serious? Listen to me. Like, I'm telling you, this man will make good on these promises that are in Project 2025 and in debates. And he's like, it's not me, which many people knew that was going to be the case. So now that we're on the other side of January 20th and folks are like, oh my gosh, I didn't think he'd actually do it. It's like, he promised it. You didn't think he would do it to you. And this is where we are right now as a country. You were in the find out stage because you messed around and voted for this man, or you couldn't vote for this Black woman and you voted for this election cicada, Jill Stein, or whatever you told yourself you needed to do to make sure that Donald Trump got back into office. And now we're seeing that the boot of oppression, as I say in the piece, doesn't just extend to Black people, in particular immigrants. It's extending to all Americans unless we've come to the realization that we have to band together.
You're right. Black people are not surprised. Far too many well-meaning white Americans have been what I like to call ally ostriches, believing in progress while burying their heads in the sand when discussions around the past become uncomfortable. Or newer Americans, perhaps the children of immigrants of recent decades, who don't see what business it is of theirs, what violence slave owners or Jim Crow enforcers visited on their fellow citizens, or the legacy of it. And now some of them are seeing people who look like them summarily deported. How did this happen, you ask? I'm an ally ostrich. I did not think that they were going to start erasing taking names and plaques down and changing websites and going into the African American Museum in DC, the Smithsonian Museum, and wanting to make efforts to change the slavery exhibits there, apparently, as the reporting yesterday. I didn't think they were going to go so far as using the federal government to erase current things and websites. So I'm an ostrich.
And my question is like, why not? Why didn't you think you would do that? It's laid out and promised in Project 2025. And B, as so many Black women, the 92% of us who I mentioned in the piece, we said time and time again, not just Chrissy Greer, but everybody was saying the first time around, he's just casing the joint. And he had good meaning Republicans around him at different points in time who said this is an overreach and it's a bridge too far. There were enough people around him who put on some guardrails to protect the democracy, because much of our democracy is just norms. It's not necessarily laws. It's just modes of behavior. And the way I explain that to my students, it's like when I walk into the classroom, I stand in the front, you all are sitting in chairs, you're looking at me. At a certain point in time, I start talking, you all start writing, and we interact for an hour and 15 minutes, no disruptions. That's not a law. That's a norm. That's just how we behave. But if by some random chance I changed that, they changed it, they started not sitting in chairs or turning their backs, whatever it may be, coming in and out of the bus station, they're not breaking the law. So it's just norms. And so many Black women were like, listen, the first time he took notes, and Steve Miller and Steve Bannon took notes on what is a law and these norms that we're just so accustomed to. It's okay, so we can start to undo norms, and then we can really start to undo laws. And there's so many beautiful Easter eggs in the Constitution, Federalist 51, checks and balances, separation of powers. But if you start to erode all of those separations of powers and all of those checks and balances, and the executive branch was never meant to be this strong, and you can have a feckless Congress that's also of your party, keep in mind, Donald Trump is solely disinterested in the legislative process, even though he has unified government, which is the Republicans control the House and the Senate. He could actually make laws. He's not interested in that. He likes executive orders, which are they're two tools that Congress, the framing fathers, I don't like to call them the fathers. I like to call them the framers, not the founding fathers. But they're two tools that they gave the executive branch because they wanted it relatively weak and just like a step above a clerk. And the two tools are the veto and executive orders. But you can always overturn executive orders by judicial action. But if you control the courts and you stack them the first time around, then you've got a Supreme Court and a John Roberts who will say, no, it's okay.
Yeah, very well said. You also say in this piece, in the midst of this fear and real threats to democracy, most Black people are not only not surprised, but also tired out by explaining why all of this is not surprising. And yes, I'm aware there are a few Black ostriches too. This is why many of the 92% of Black women who have been the, quote, keepers of the Democratic Party and democracy writ large have been resoundingly silent. Why did no one listen to us? I was so moved by that cartoon or drawing of Black women on top of a building watching the city burn. I can't describe it. Probably a lot of people saw it, but to me, it was a good picture example of what you're writing there. Why did no one listen to us? Why did no one listen to you?
Why would people listen to the cleanup women, which is what I write about in the piece, right? In the sort of patriarchy, racial, anti-Black, white supremacist nation that we live in, it's like, we're not men. And that's the sort of the promise of white supremacy and patriarchy always dangles that in front of Black men, even though by and large they don't take the bait. We're not white women, which is the promise of they're the only ones who can make white men. So they're always going to be a protected class. And we know that our sisterhood can only go but so far because of that. So it's like we are in the non-dominant group, at least in America, in both ways. And I think the Pulitzer Prize winning photo from April 5th was all these white folks marching in the street and Black people having brunch. I didn't get myself into this.
Oh, from this past Saturday, the hands
Saturday. I'm so curious to see the number of Black people who actually attended because I don't know a single Black person in my very expansive Rolodex attended one march.
I was part of two events last week. I hosted an event, and there was 200 indivisible members from Rockland County, and then I was at the protest in Rockland County. There's plenty of Black folks here. Very few.
March?
Very few. It looked like
The memo went out. Stay your black behind home. We didn't get into this mess, and the only way that we're going to get out of it is when white folks recognize the mess that they have made. That is essentially the memo that went out. And from top to bottom, I wasn't interested in the Women's March and the pink knitting hats. The first time around, I was like, you're not going to catch me catching pneumonia just because you didn't talk to your parents and your siblings about the dangers of this man. It was like, absolutely not. Knit your own hat. Leave me alone. And now you want me to come out and march again because you didn't do your work again? You didn't deliver white women again? No, I'm not doing it.
Well, I'm not doing it.
And I'm really curious to see the number of black people who actually marched, because we are solely disinterested. As I said in the piece, we're learning line dances. We're looking at Meghan Markle take snacks out of a big bag and put them in a small bag, bottle up water, make labels.
Now take us inside the conversation with black folks, and particularly with black women. What are you saying on those texts about us?
White folks, you can get yourselves out of this mess.
The
only way that we are going to get out of this mess is if white people snap out of it. And sadly, the number of texts that I've gotten where I'm like, you have completely missed the point of my op-ed. I just got one just now. I had such a great time at the march. And I'm like, you missed it.
It's very interesting when someone publishes something in the New York Times. I'm sure this happens to you when you're on TV or when you publish anything, but especially you publish something like this in the New York Times. So a lot of people sharing it. I shared it. You probably get a lot more reactions. What have been the reactions to this piece since it went up yesterday?
This one so far has been pretty positive, knock on wood. I always have to give my admin a heads up because I get lots of hate mail for sure. And she was like, no, surprisingly, no hate. And she's like, no terrible phone calls and no hate mail. She's had a crash course in racism and sexism since she became my admin. But she said this one so far. I've gotten lots of really thoughtful comments from black women who've said, you're saying what I was feeling, but I didn't know how to put it in that particular language. I've gotten some really thoughtful comments from black women who are leaders of nonprofits who are like, you said the thing that I can't say because I'm still trying to raise money. There are lots of white folks who are like, I have been thinking about this, but didn't really know how to put it into words, and I'll think about this. And then some other white people are just like, I'm wearing my pink hat and I'm marching right now. And it's at another person on our group chat gives this long, and this reminds me of like others and bubble and disability studies. And I was like, you are doing everything in your power to have a conversation that is not the conversation that I'm having.
Oh, I love that range of reactions. I was just going to send you a picture of my head on an ostrich.
Yes, there's lots. Crazy enough, though, and we love birds, there's no ostrich emoji.
Oh, huh. Yeah, I don't think an ostrich is even a bird.
I don't know. When I eat it, the meat tastes like steak.
Oh, of course. Of course.
In my freezer, I've got goat, I've got oxtail, I've got ostrich, I've got bison, I've got duck, I've got fish, chicken. If it runs, swims, or walks, or flies, I'm going to eat it.
That's why I reacted that way, just in case people don't know.
Sorry, vegetarians out there.
See really well. I know that she eats anything that moves.
Yeah, I do. If I'm not allergic to it, it's fair game.
I'm looking. Oh, it is a bird. Ostriches are the world's largest and heaviest living birds.
They're huge. Have you ever seen one? They're very tall.
Yeah, I was attacked by one when I was a young boy.
Oh. And the oil, like the oil underneath their feathers.
Let me finish.
I spend lots of money. It's face cream.
I ended up killing it and inventing oil, ostrich oil. If you would have let me finish, that's what happened. I'm like Richard, basically.
That's what happened. I went to an ostrich farm outside of Bogota.
Yeah, I've been to the same one.
Of course. But like the eggs are a thing, the feathers are a thing, but the meat is delicious.
Well, I don't know where the phrase "put your head in the sand like an ostrich" came from, but it is a good getting back.
That's how they dig for things in the sand.
Oh, but getting back to the idea that it means that you have your head in the sand, that you're not paying attention, that you're not.
Their butts are in the air and their heads are completely down under, and like they're vulnerable.
I remember I've said this a million times, but the first time I realized that Black Americans were not surprised, the first overt time at least, was when I was interviewing a comedian named Bruce, who's a Black man.
Oh, I love Bruce.
A couple years after 9/11, and I was talking about terrorism and being afraid of terrorists, and he just started laughing. It was like a comedy show, it was comedians, but the context mattered. But he just started laughing really hard, and then he went off on a bit about how he loved watching white people be afraid after 9/11. And then he made me understand that they saw the Klan as the same way that white people saw Al-Qaeda. Black people saw the Klan. So we've always seen terrorism. And so I was like, oh, so you're not surprised. And that was my kind of innocence.
But I would argue that the difference is Al-Qaeda in America is like 10 people, and the Klan in America could be anybody.
I think that if you're a well-meaning white, WMW, an ally, if you will, you could learn this lesson, but then forget it pretty easily. I think I tend to do that as close as I am with so many black folks in my life on a pretty regular basis. Even if you were married into a black family or whatever, you immersed in black culture somehow, you could still easily forget and be surprised is my thesis idea.
And I would argue that what a luxury that must be.
Oh, it's wonderful.
So like
just being a man and never having to worry.
Hey, like most women, this is the beauty of the brain, but especially at a certain age, I'm mid-40s, so I've aged out of like much of the danger zone, but I'm definitely not out of it. But it's, hey, let's just try and live a life where you're not like raped by a stranger.
But short of that, in between rape by a stranger is looks and harassment daily. And
listen, to our Cuomo point, if I had a freaking dollar for every man in a professional setting who accidentally kissed me on the side of my mouth, right? It's like I'd be close to a millionaire. It happens so regularly. The number of men who are hand talkers and graze your boobs or like accidentally graze your butt. Yeah. I tell a lot of my guy friends and they're like, what? I'm like, you're not skeevy. But let's be clear. There are a lot of men where it's just, these are the cheap shots. And I call it the hologram sexism, where it's like, when men say and do certain things, where it's like, if I were to explain it, you're like, Chrissy, he just said blah, blah, blah. Or like, it was just a look, or it was an accident. And you don't see it, but just like a hologram, someone else from a different angle sees it very clearly. And there's some men who are really good at hologram sexism, where it's just like to say something. It's like, when I said this, he said it in this tone. And it's a frequency that certain men use where they know that they're being skeevy, but you can't really pin it down. Like the wave has already receded back into the ocean by the time you can say something.
That's a good metaphor. Speaking of hologram sexism, it's the name of my band, and we are playing. It's awkward to admit now. We're playing this Thursday at CBGB's. So sorry about that. I've never heard that term. It's
my term.
Yeah.
Because I think like when Me Too is happening, and it's like the amount of hologram sexism that I've dealt with in a professional setting is like, it's a lot. I call like there's certain men who have mastered, they tend to be of a certain age too. They've mastered the lower back, upper ass. It's like perfect. It's like a perfect place on your body.
I was saying this. I was having a conversation with a woman recently privately about this, and I was speaking of the title of your piece is "Black Americans Are Not Surprised." This conversation is now "Women Are Not Surprised." I am surprised to hear that men are still touching in a work atmosphere at all. Touching. I remember Steve Bannon putting his hand on a woman's lower back like that, as you're describing, and I remember being horrified by and thinking it was just because he was such an awful creep. Seeing him do that when I shared a studio with him, it's serious. But like, have you not noticed a difference in just actual touching, in whether it be academia? You straddle both because you'll be in media spaces and nonprofits, and I
mean, older men. They're going to do what they're going to do. I had an older colleague once say something that was wildly inappropriate when he was in my office, and we were having like an important meeting, so the door was closed, which I very rarely ever have my door fully closed. And he said something super inappropriate, and I was like, hey, that is absolutely inappropriate and never to be repeated again. And he was like, ugh, Chrissy, are you one of these Me Too people? I was like, yes, I am. Right? Like, sure, put me in the bucket of being a Me Too lady. But I think, what's important and what a lot of men don't understand is this is the thing that your moms definitely experienced if they worked outside of the home, right? Or your sisters and your wives. But it's sadly something that like your two daughters have probably experienced this in ways that whether it's articulated or not, right? Because there was so much of when like Me Too started where I looked up and I was like, wait, that's a Me Too? Oh, I just thought that was like normal behavior. I didn't know that it was like even inappropriate behavior because it happens so often.
Yeah.
It's just part of, I don't live in bubble wrap inside my house. I got to work. So it's if I work with men, and by and large, they say and do inappropriate stuff sometimes. But there are ranges, right? So it's no one has ever walked up to me like when I was in like the Naples train station and goosed my boob. Have I been in multiple work settings where someone has accidentally touched my boobs? Sure. Right? This is why I dress like a eunuch when I do presentations, because you start to tell yourself, it's like, oh, maybe I stood too closely and I do have boobs. So like, maybe it was me. Right. And it's no, or maybe they're just some men who are really good at always copping a feel.
I'm looking forward to your next column. Women are not surprised, because we started talking more about gender here, but that's all disappointing and upsetting and totally understandable. And I guess unsurprising is where I should end.
What are you gonna do?
I love you and appreciate you. And this is such a good piece. I hope everybody reads it and shares it, and always looking forward to whatever's next with you. Thank you very much for doing this with me today, as always.
I always love spending time with you.
All right, there she goes, Dr. Christina Greer, who is always great on the show. Love that conversation. Hopefully you did as well. Go follow her, go support her, go get her books, go do all of the things that you can. Let her know that you heard her here on the show. Always love having her. She's on Instagram. She's a great follow on Instagram because not only of her views on politics and so on, but she travels around a lot, takes a lot of good pictures, nature pictures. And so go follow her on her Instagram, which is also linked in the show notes. All right. Well, now it's time to get to my second guest. That's right. I got two guests on today's show. Can you believe it? I love talking to Colby Hall from Mediaite. I love reading Mediaite, Mediaite.com. And Colby is the founding editor there, also a Peabody Award-winning television producer. And I wanted to catch up with him yesterday when news broke that Trump blinked and caved on his tariffs and how it was covered in media. And I always love his thoughts on politics as well. So go follow Colby, go support him and read him at Mediaite, which is all linked in the show notes as well. Let's do it right now with Colby Hall. Oh, I read him every day over at Mediaite, and I always love when he publishes something new. He's very relevant and been covering the trade war as well as anybody in all of media. Colby Hall is back, and I'm very happy to see you, my friend. You look great. You look healthy. You look handsome.
Thank you, Pedro.
Now, we just we had a big development today.
Signalgate? Are we going to talk about Signalgate?
Oh, we can go back to that for sure.
I'm joking. I made the joke today. I was like, hey, remember, did anyone remember Signalgate? That was like the thing that we were all like obsessed over, and reasonably so, until the latest chaos thing. And of course, today was the big
it's a point I was going to make just about the media cycle, and that you wrote about over the weekend how Trump did not meet the soldiers who were the dead soldiers when they came back. What's it called? The transition ceremony. And I mean, that would have been a monster story in years past, of course, but it's always worth reminding people how quickly this news cycle moves with this guy whose entire role seems to be being in the public eye, being on TV, being talked about, right? I mean, it's hard to keep track.
Well, I think he understands straight up pro wrestling that he can control, by controlling the conflict, he can control the narrative and therefore keep media dopes like myself. We can't resist taking the bait. And you know, it's how he's a master, but it's also how he gets himself out of trouble. And it, I think ultimately is pernicious and doesn't serve us well.
We've seen this pattern before where he says something's broken and it's not. And then he, quote, fixes it and he didn't and just says he did. Or often he breaks a thing and then tries to repair it and says that he did. What would you call what we've seen so far? The headline at Mediaite above your name is Trump caved. Why the White House rollout of his tariff pause is evidence of defeat.
Well, first of all, it was always going to be a victory lap regardless of the resolution. I mean, it just, you know, and just because that's the way Trump works, is that everything, never admit a mistake, never admit a fail, a loss, you know, everything is a win. You know, he's a real estate guy that just is always selling, right? I thought what was pretty clear was that the way they rolled this out, right? Up until, you know, last night and even this morning, he was talking about how he wasn't going to bend. The White House said there was never any negotiations. It doesn't seem like there really were negotiations. There may have been nations that reached out to say, hey, what's going on here? And he clearly pivoted to China being the bad guy and saying that doing because they, a lack of respect that they were showing. They were going to get a huge thing, but then he put the pause on the tariffs. You saw Scott Bessent come out right outside the Oval Office and do a press gaggle. You saw Peter Navarro go on Fox Business. You saw Howard Lutnick. There was this obvious PR rollout. And so I wrote that. And then Trump basically came out and said, yeah, well, people were getting yippy. They were getting yippy. They were getting a little nervous, which is a flat admission that things are going south. And then Charles Gasparino, who's on Fox Business, who's a pretty straight reporter from Wall Street World, he said the thing that everyone already knows, and that is that the bond markets were crushing. And I'm not a big finance guy, but China holds a ton of U.S. bonds, right? Yeah. So if the bonds market goes south and China holds a lot, it puts us in an extraordinarily weak position. So I think his back was to the wall, and he had to sort of, he had to cut bait on this one, at least for 90 days. The one side note is that Scott Bessent said, 10% applies to Mexico and Canada. And as it turns out, that's not the case. So it was a mess. It was a clusterfuck amongst the Trump administration, and it's still not clear how this is all going to shake out.
Trump won. There was a problem with messaging in that his top deputies, cabinet secretaries, and others would be on a plane on the way to a country to negotiate or on TV, and he would put out a tweet or a post and completely undercut the mission that the person thought they were are supposed to be delivering. Today seemed like the most acute example of that because his Secretary of Treasury was out talking. He had Peter Navarro on television, and his trade rep was testifying in front of the House, and none of them knew or seemed to know this was the strategy or that this was going to happen. It seemed like Trump himself made this decision, snap decision, didn't tell anybody. And there's even reporting over at your outlet Mediaite that a reporter broke that to staffers in the White House, and all of them were surprised. So it seems like there is no message, there is no plan. It's all this one crazy king.
It's whimsical. It's literally I choose to do this now. I do think that he succumbed. I think he heard a ton of smart people that he respects. He respects billionaires, right? And if they're all to a person saying, bro, what are you doing? But I think there's a significant difference between Trump 2 and Trump 1. Trump 1, as you said, he wasn't really prepared for D.C., and he surrounded himself by a lot of competent people. Gary Cohn, for example. Rex Tillerson probably wasn't ready to be Secretary of State, but he was a smart, reasonable person, and he couldn't believe there were a lot of people in the Trump cabinet in the Trump first administration that were actually well accomplished, people who were willing to confront Trump over his levels of, inconsistency at best. Trump, too, is a bubble of sycophancy. All these guys are the biggest brown nosers in the world, and they know that they're on the Trump train, and none of them have the balls to say, bro, stop with the Canada 51st state thing. You sound like an idiot. How does that even work? Or this Trump tariff thing, or this trade tariff thing, these are deficits that we benefit from. This is something that there's a reason why we signed NAFTA, later at USMCA, because everyone benefits from this. So you're calling a tariff, it was fundamentally confused. He's calling deficits in trade, which we benefit from, a tariff. So yeah, there's a lot of bad information out there. And it's, a lot of people criticized the press for not saying Biden was clearly in cognitive decline. I think we can say that. I think it's fair to say that cognitive decline presents in different ways. And Trump, I don't think he's, slowing down. I think he's certainly a good communicator, not like Biden, but he's lost the plot. And so,
there's cognitive decline, and there's what people have always said about him is that he's some kind of psychopath.
Narcissist, he really believes his own. It's a weird sort of some people think it's a will to power Nietzsche Ubermensch thing. I think it's more of the egocentrism of a toddler. A 2-year-old sees a toy and thinks that it's his universe, and I want that toy. Can't comprehend any reality in which he doesn't. This toddler, theoretical toddler, he or she doesn't get the thing that they want. I think that's what Trump is. I think he really. And candidly, it's work. He is comfortable in chaos, and he's worked through a myriad of bankruptcies, and yet in the White House for the second time. I mean, it defies any logic, but yeah, it's bizarre.
The trade policy is the antithesis of classical conservative trade ideology. And so you don't have anybody from the libertarian wing all the way to the, most religious white Christian nationalist wing. Nobody likes these ideas. Conservative economists aren't presenting these ideas. So you got Republicans in Congress that don't want to support them, don't understand them. Right-wing economists and other Americans that don't really understand this or understand why. The only person, it's like Peter Navarro, who was in jail last year, referring to a fake economist that he made up, which is actually him. And then what Trump seems to understand about President McKinley are the only driving force here, because everybody around him, everybody that's including Elon Musk and these billionaires, we're against this and are against this. It defies political analysis because you're entering them. There's no strategy there at all, and we're left just with psychology, it would seem.
Yeah, I mean, I saw Scott Galloway on CNN yesterday where he compared this to learning about leeches that medicine people used in medieval times. Like, can you believe that, tariffs were the same thing as leeches? Like, how could anyone have ever thought that was a good idea? And yet, that was what tariffs were, the leeches of our time until enter Trump. It's funny because James Carville, he predicted this sort of like about 40 days ago. He said, Democrats play possum. This Trump thing is going to collapse. I wrote a column today that said he was right. And, this was before the tariffs. I think you could argue that Chuck Schumer may have been wise to not shut down the government. Because if the government were shut down and all this was going on, it would have been a much worse bloodbath. That's a conversation for another day.
No, it's
Carville, Go ahead.
I was breaking up and for a second on my end, I think. But talk to me about what Carville. You talked to him. What happened? You opened his crypt.
He told me, he was like, he wrote a thing in the New York Times saying that this was all going to go south, and he said, I thought this was going to happen Memorial Day, not April Fool's. They also said, and this is the point, Congress could fix this in 2 hours.
Yeah.
They could literally say, we'll take care of this afternoon. We can just vote to remove the power from the executive branch, return it to Congress, and all of this would go away. And that's what the Democrats need to do regardless, because even though there's a pause, it's not like the United States has suddenly won back any sense of economic stability in global standing. Like, the damage, a lot of it is already done. So short term, the market went back up 2,000 points, yippee. But would you want to do business with the United States right now if you were in any other nation? I wouldn't, and that's going to take some time to repair.
If it ever does get repaired, that seems to be a key point that a lot of smart people in business are making. Certainty matters and trust matters. And if you say you're going to do a thing and then you turn your back on it the next day.
Stability was on our
I also wanted to ask you about the all the business channels, networks, and all those talking heads from CNBC to Fox Business to Bloomberg. I didn't see anybody defending this trade war, and I saw everybody panicking. Did you see anything different?
We see some Fox Business guests, like, Art Laffer, like the Laffer curve, the guy who sort of Reaganomics supply side. And, he would say, he was a guest today saying basically, he's a genius. He pulled it off. Again, that's not rooted in anything other than just flat out brown nosing. This is where he wants to be booked on Fox News. Fox News wants to have people on that are not saying things that are negative to Trump. And there is this vicious cycle of access and promotion. It's clout chasing in a way that's, I think, really bad and pernicious for meaning and fact-based truth and journalism. I thought Jim Cramer and David Farber had an interesting thing, or Faber had an interesting thing today, where they flatly were saying Trump is unchecked. There are no checks and balances. And they were saying this isn't the United States of America. And it was in the context of a financial report. But if you take that away, you're like, holy shit. I mean, they're basically saying that this is an authoritarian, it was a smart, dispassionate analysis that was saying this is not how the USA is supposed to or has ever worked. And Trump has undermined institutions, and now he's taking advantage of it. And we're failing now as a result. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But no, business journalists were all for the most part, saying this is dumb. Stop it.
The Wall Street Journal.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, basically saying this is insane. This is dumb. Stop it. As you mentioned earlier, the Treasuries markets cratering seemed to probably be the final straw. But what a day. What a crazy day and week in markets. And, you know, you sense the rage out there. You saw some of it being channeled through senators, both on the right and left, when questioning this trade representative yesterday. Then again, in the House. I mean, talking to my friend this morning, I'm sure I lost the same percentage of my investment retirement portfolio as he did, but he's 65 and I'm 49. And he basically said the gains I've made in the last 5 years are all erased in a day. And the way that he talked about it and the way that you think about that, you can rely on that. Shit happens. But this was completely self-inflicted, but seemingly by one guy, not by like the entire financial industry, which was deregulated and created in the financial crisis of 2008. It was just one mad king, it would seem. And people are angry, and I wonder what that turns into and how it's being perceived in media, et cetera. Thoughts?
Well, two things. I think if you're a Democrat, there is a silver lining in this politically, and no one wants to see the economy or the stock market tank. That's terrible. However, I think this has pulled back the curtain for a lot of people, or rather revealed that the president's got no clothes, right? To use the emperor no clothes thing. So I think there's that. I think people will really push for, the unchecked power thing doesn't work. This is what happens, right? And so I think Congress should be emboldened to say, hey, we need to return some of our power. I'll be mostly fascinated by the polls that emerge that started at the end of last week, right? There's a few small polls that came out following the Liberation Day bullshit announcement, but it went from bad to worse to much, much worse. So the polls that sort of were mostly taken earlier this week, I expect those to be disasters for Trump. And I suspect they had some internal polling that was probably informing their decisions as well. Because, of course, there's 28% of America that are just blindly following Trump no matter what. But again, I have a lot of Republican friends from the Midwest who can't stand Trump personally, but vote for him for tribal policy reasons. And they have, to a person, all finally admitted, like, yeah, this was terrible. This is
interesting.
Not the way to work. Well, so, yeah, I think there's going to be a comeuppance. I just worry that the news cycle and the attention span is so short that, 10 days from now, we will look back and make the joke. Remember the tariff war? That was a crazy thing.
It would seem that the main consequence, primary one that most people are seeing, is in their investment portfolios and markets tanking. But what I feel like is it all depends on how the media interprets this, and plenty of right-wing and Trump media are going to say he's a genius, as you mentioned. Then, though, it's not so much about the markets, and things have not healed with China, and they have a lot more staying power than we do, and a command, like central economy, like they just make widgets. The leaders there just go, widgets, sell them now, and they're hot, and they sell them, or whatever they want to do, stick together. They can deal with a lot more pain than we certainly can. And so my big point is the markets are one thing, but if the price of things goes up and stays up the way it seems like it probably will, just as a result of China, much as some of the other confusion and the chaos, that's a thing that people will notice. And there's not an easy way to spin something like that if everything from computers to cars go way up over the next year or 2 years. And I'm not sure why they wouldn't, Colby, at this point.
I mean, the China trade tariff thing is still unresolved, right? And it's going
to get ugly.
It's going to kill Hollywood. It's going to, their biggest importer from the United States is soybeans. So it's going to kill a lot of farmers, right? Like 10% of all soybean sales, go to China, from my understanding. So, and look, movie stars are maybe going to get paid a little bit less to star in the next Fast and Furious feature. But, there's, you and I both know that there's tons of people behind the camera, whether they're marketers or hair and makeup or gaffers, what have you, and those budgets are going to come down. So, but to your point, consumer price index is something, even Trump admitted this. Like once prices go up with inflation, they almost never come down. They flatten, right? So if we see the prices go up, that's the new bottom, right? It's the new thing. And unless there's a big disruption, which would come from some sort of catastrophe, disaster, what have you, it's hard to imagine the consumer price index coming down. And again, I think that's going to, seeing as he ran on dropping the price of eggs and promising that inflation would come down within 24 hours of him taking the oath of office. Well, guess what? Like, first of all, that's bullshit. No one can do that. But if you vote based on that promise, I would like to think, of course, there's going to be some that are blindly following him regardless, but people are going to be like, oh, it isn't that simple, and he's just full of shit. And so there's, he also has a do not give a fuck attitude right now because he's ostensibly lame duck. He could be losing his mojo. I mean, we've been saying the walls are closing in on him forever, and it never happens. He's fucking political Rasputin. But, the honeymoon is ending really early for him. And I think people are over the chaos.
Trump 1 versus Trump 2, everybody is making the point of there were guardrails. You mentioned earlier there were more adults in the room. Now that he's left in the wild and all he has is sycophants, he's able to trust whatever his own instincts and gut are. And, before you know, he's deporting people. He's disappearing people. The Doge cuts and this trade war, not to mention all of the rest, and not to mention just his regular behavior, golfing all the time, not meeting those soldiers. The guy's just got nobody reining him in, no Jared Kushner even. And his worst instincts are, as we all know, horrific. He's a criminal. His worst instincts are straight criminal. And now it seems like he's able to complete most of them without much barrier. And what does that mean to the public and to voters? I just can't imagine it won't mean pretty much the same thing to most people except for his hardcore pickup truck driving, flag adhering to the pickup truck and the boat guys. If you don't have a flag attached to your vehicle, then you're going to turn against this guy.
So to that point, I would say I think Trump is symptomatic to a larger issue, and the larger issue is angry, isolated, poorly informed people, and from then is the xenophobia that Trump exploits, right? So I'm not trying to give anyone a pass. I'm just saying that Trump has recognized that as a weakness that he can exploit and call his people. The other thing I would say is that the most influential person in the Trump 2 White House, it seems right now, is Stephen Miller. And I don't know if you get this a lot, but you remind me a lot of him.
What an asshole! I saw that coming right at the last second. I saw it coming, and I got ready, like my abs hardened so I could take the punch. But yes, you're right.
No. He is perhaps the most.
I was just at the mall. I was just picking up eggs, and some lady screamed at me, "Stop separating families!" I was like, "Lady, I am whoever you think I am."
I get a young Tom Homan. People say, like, "Are you the?"
Oh,
are you
please!
Tom Homan? Have you done work? And I was like, no,
you get a young
he's a great American.
Then they hear your voice.
These are the people that are leading our country right now.
Yep.
Which is
terrific. Yep. Well, we'll see what happens next. You guys are covering it really well on Mediaite day to day. It's really fascinating to see the changes in media and where people are getting their information, but it does seem like when it comes to breaking news, you do go to those cable networks. When it comes to those tickers, you tend to turn to them to see what's happening. What do you think?
I will just say that, like, we've evolved into a place that answers the question, "What have I just missed?" Which is great in some respects, but it's pretty disposable. And so there's some self-awareness that we're not necessarily doing all of the God's work. That's why I try to do some columns and add a little bit of reason and voice to it. But and I also feel like there's a way that we can frame news reporting ahead of it. But I appreciate you being a loyal reader and saying nice things.
Oh yeah, always, every day. I and literally is a lot of that is what I miss. I went out to lunch with a friend and I was gone maybe an hour. I didn't look at my phone because I was being a good boy. And then I looked at my phone and the trade war was over. It's not over. It's probably still going strong because of China and everything else, and it's going to continue. But what I mean was he cucked.
My boy Aiden was doing a podcast with Chuck Todd, of which they spent 45 minutes talking about Trump's tariff policy. And during that podcast recording, it was over or paused for 90 days. Like,
quick
Let's
pivot.
look back at that fun time an hour ago where this was a relevant time, but sometimes it's good to unplug and check out. I recommend that for everyone.
Yes, absolutely. Like I said, get in the woods, and
Good
then
stuff.
your friend will talk to you about his investment portfolio, and you will talk about yours, and then you will cry, and you're a tree.
There you go.
Colby, thank you so much for joining me. I always appreciate it. Keep up the great work.
Thanks, mate.
Yeah, Colby Hall, everybody. Mediaite. Check them out. I read them every day, and I always read Colby's articles. His writing is really interesting, and he's a well-connected, thoughtful guy, and I love talking to him. Good friend, too. He's become a cool friend in my life. You know, we're around the same age. We've seen some of the same shit in our lives and in our careers, and he's a good guy. I like talking to him. There you go. Colby Hall and Chrissy Greer, and you. Thank you for stopping by. I hope that you'll come by our hangout tonight. Should be a good one. So click that link, the Zoom link, at 8 p.m. tonight, and I will let you in the room, and I will see you there. It's always a fun way to replenish your soul, somehow just commiserating, connecting with other people here on Earth One. It seems to do the trick. All right, that's all I've got for you, and thank you very much for supporting the show. Sorry it's a little late today. John Carroll singing us in and out each and every day. Go buy his new album, johncarroll.org. Be the change you want to see out there today, and I will talk to you tonight. And thank you especially to you bumblebees who listen all the way to the very, very end.
That's right. We got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your